communities, and will continue to do so, because financial knowledge unlocks opportunities, strengthens resilience, and empowers us to make informed choices. Today, we reflect on our progress and consider the next steps in closing the gender gap in financial literacy.
All of you, and thank you so much for joining us on the occasion of this event. We are very pleased to mark the International Women's Day a little earlier, but that's because March the 8th happens to be on a Sunday. So maybe not all of you would have showed up on a Sunday. And we are focusing on our initiative, which was, as you remember, last year dedicated to closing the gender gap in financial literacy. Now, it's a very focused topic with a very positive agenda, as you will see, and all that in a strange global situation that we have to acknowledge, that we monitor very carefully to understand what the economic consequences will be. But, as often the case, hardship hurts women disproportionately. And it would be hardly surprising if this was not the case again. So, we made a commitment a year ago, and that commitment endures. Because the gender gap in financial literacy remains wide. Based on our consumer survey, we can conclude that more than 50% of Europeans do not have a solid financial literacy and understanding of financial markets. And that 50% comprises 60% of women. They are the ones who struggle with financial literacy, and they are also the ones who are poorly placed to cope when financial shocks suddenly arrive, and who find it harder to invest, not just in the early days, not just through midlife, but also when they're retired. So this is a gap that needs to be closed, if only for them. But it's not just for them. It's also for the global economy, and it is certainly the case for the European economy. We know that Europeans tend to be savers by whatever nature, genetics, DNA, culture, but we are more savers than we are investors. We also know that Europe's capital market remains underdeveloped and fragmented, that households tend to, when they invest, not to invest necessarily in Europe, but outside of Europe. So within that picture, the underrepresentation of women is really obvious. Women in the EU are 12 percentage points less likely than men to use investment products. And we will find out that when they do, there is a bias that applies to them in the relationship with the advisors. Greater financial literacy helps people better understand the risks and helps them strike the right balance between savings. There's nothing wrong with savings as such, but the right balance between saving and prudent investment. Now, of course, closing the gender gap in financial literacy will not on its own transform Europe's capital markets. It will take a bit more than that, but it is certainly a concrete and measurable contribution to deepening them, and one that makes women themselves more financially secure now and in the future. So the case for action is strong, and the question is, how do we get there? And that is certainly an item that was identified by all of us a year ago, and what has happened in the last 12 months is just mind-boggling. Because of the 5 objectives that we set for ourselves, 2 have been reached and exceeded, 3 remains in the making, and as you will see, there will be more objectives that we set out for ourselves. So, there is one conclusion that I think all of us around this podium will agree with, and it is that education is critically important. Now, why is that? It's because it is a fact that women, despite having an average lower level of financial literacy, respond particularly well to financial education and training. The eagerness to learn is there. It can and it must be developed. Second, research tells us, and we have a wonderful professor to accompany us in this consideration, research tells us that confidence, or rather the lack of confidence, accounts for up to 1/3 of the gender gap in financial literacy. This is, to a significant degree, a gap in self-esteem, self-belief, and that is precisely the kind of barriers that good education can help with. These findings carry a great implication. The return on investing in financial education for women is high. When we give our knowledge, our time, our tools, even simply our encouragement, others gain the confidence and clarity to take the road ahead. So this is the idea of this year, the idea that we can give to gain. Nice alliteration of G's, give to gain, and you will understand a lot better what goes on in that respect. Last year, as I said, we made 5 commitments, 2 box checked, 3 remained in the making, and good progress being made, and there will be more on this front. On this note, allow me to introduce our guest, Tabea Kusher-Koenen, a renowned expert on financial literacy. Thank you, Professor, for joining us. Joachim Nagel, who needs no introduction, President of the Deutsche Bundesbank. Yanis Stournaras, the Governor of the National Central Bank of Greece. And of course, we have our moderator who has agreed to join us, not just because he's the Financial Times Deputy Chief Editor, something along those lines, but also because he had a very important organization within this institution which focuses on financial literacy, of which he's a great expert as well. So with guests like them today, no doubt that we will go a long way to making progress and understanding certain elements better. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you, Madame Lagarde. As you say, I am here with 2 hats on. The first is, as a journalist, I'm the Deputy Editor of the Financial Times, but 5 years ago, the FT had the realization that there was a lot of education that was not reaching target audiences through the pages of the FT, and that is foundational financial education for everyone. And we set about trying to make a difference to that mission by founding our own charity, which is called FLIC, the Financial Literacy and Inclusion Campaign. And it's with that hat on that I'm also here, and I'm delighted to be joined by such a erudite panel. As Madame Lagarde said, it's unfortunately a truth that is very difficult to deal with, that in Europe, as in so many countries around the world, women have lower levels of financial literacy, and I think we can hopefully get to the bottom of some of the reasons why during our discussion today. I'd love to start with Professor Kusher-Koenen. Tell us why this is the case. Have you identified in your research the real reasons?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me and speaking about this important topic, because actually what is very interesting about this gender gap is that it's not new. So we've seen it in the data already 20 years ago, and I'm very sad to say that not a lot has happened since. So we've documented the gender gap the first time, I think, with Dutch data in 2005, and then we did it with German data in 2008, and with US data and Swedish data, etc. And the interesting thing is it's always there. And then we compare it across more countries, and what we see is that it's actually also there in countries that are doing really well on other gender equality indices. So there is something that goes beyond just having equality in terms of education or labor market participation. So somehow this is there. And then we started, when we saw this across the world, we started digging a little bit deeper, and we thought, well, maybe it's going to be different if we look at the younger women. And I was very struck that it wasn't. So the gender gap is there among the young and the old. Then we looked into those with higher education, and it was also there. And then we thought maybe it's the experience. So we started looking into financial decision makers. But then if you look into financial decision makers that are women, they're very often single women or single moms. And so it was even worse for them. And so in a way, everything that was found was not very hopeful. And Then we started looking into the patterns that we saw when we were measuring financial literacy. And what we found there is that the women did not get the questions wrong, but they all said, I don't know. So whenever they had the opportunity to say don't know in the answer options, they ticked these boxes. And so we wanted to know, is it that they really don't know, or are they just telling us that they know, and when we take away the do not know, they would actually give us the correct answer? And so what we saw, and that was the result that you already alluded to, is that about 30% of this gender gap that we measured was actually explained by a lack of confidence. So women disproportionately said they didn't know, while if they were not given the opportunity to go for the do not know box, they actually got the right answer. And so in the end, the picture is that about 30% is a lack of confidence, but still the rest, so the 70%, are a lack of knowledge. And then we went a step further and said, well, but what explains their behavior in the end? And the answer there was both. So both the knowledge about the financial topics as well as the confidence matter for retirement planning, stock market participation. So all kinds of financial behaviors that you can look at, they are all to some extent explained by these components. And now the big question is, you asked, where does it come from? And so I haven't answered that question yet, because I just said, well, we find the gap everywhere, and we haven't really figured out what to do about it. But in order to understand what we can do about it, we need to understand where it comes from. And now there's research more and more about financial literacy among children and financial socialization. And the interesting thing is, it already starts there. So there's evidence that parents talk more about financial topics with boys as compared to girls. There's evidence that on average, boys get higher pocket money than girls. There's evidence on gift cards for opening trading accounts that are more likely to be given to boys than to girls. And so the question is, why does that happen? And the evidence at the moment points to the direction that a lot is related to role models, expectations, behaviors. And the interesting thing there is that these beliefs are super hard to change. So I think it takes a big effort, a lot of action to finally make progress on that front.
And then maybe along the lines of you're saying there's no difference between different ages. I guess anecdotally, there's even maybe a risk that it's going to get worse because a lot of the financial information that is put around on social media, whether it be relating to crypto or other kind of money-making schemes, are very kind of male-centered. Right? So it's a fairly intractable issue. Obviously, we're going to try to get to the bottom of ways in which we can tackle it over the next hour. President Nagel, I just wondered, from your perspective in Germany, how do you see this issue as the why it's happening and why it matters to try and close the gap?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to have again the opportunity to join you here on the panel. And I guess we will discuss what we achieved over the last 12 months. But coming back to your question, some of the arguments that I will use have already been said. We have still in our society, and this is also true for Germany, a kind of an inherent unconscious bias when it comes to financial literacy, especially what we can do for girls, what we do maybe more for the boys. But at the end, I believe it's not a women's issue, closing that gender gap in relation to financial literacy. It is something of utmost importance for our whole society. At the end, it is about economic growth, what can we achieve there, what we can do in terms of retirement plans and so on. Also, what we can do for women to become entrepreneurs and things like this. So it's a mix-up of many, many arguments that I believe at the end, the outcome for the whole society is much better in terms of in the way how we can become better to really improve our society, that this gender gap is really close. And so I believe, coming back to the core of your question, that my country, Germany, is not so different from all the other countries in Europe.
Well, as we heard from the professor, I think it's a global issue. Maybe there are some bright spots for ways in which countries challenging this intractable problem, but we'll come back to those. I wonder from the Greek point of view, given us Tournaros, do you see any bright spots? Are there in terms of tackling the why and also the why it matters?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, President. I'm very glad to be with you, especially these days. First of all, in my view, we should reduce the gender gap and the financial literacy gap for three reasons. One has to do with civilization. A few days ago, a famous Greek historian passed away. It's Helen Glykagiarveler, who said exactly, to judge the level of civilization of a country, look at the status of women. So it's a question of civilization. The second is a question of fairness and equality. To the extent that, to a large extent, the financial literacy gap is due to the so-called motherhood penalty, we should try to minimize this. And finally, it's a question of efficiency. I mean, biological studies show that talents between boys and girls, women and men are the same distribution. So accepting a gender gap is a waste of resources. So this is why we should try to minimize the gender gap and the financial literacy gap. Now, on Greece, it is the same as in other countries. Perhaps the bigger financial literacy gap is explained by the crisis because of brain drain. Many talented women left. Also, the brain drain and, the crisis left a scar on the welfare state. So the assistance to mothers was less than necessary, but I can report now a lot of progress. We can see it in surveys. We can see it in progress. Also, I can refer to the state taking initiatives to have a national strategy for financial literacy. The Bank of Greece is doing a lot. Actually, we give the best example. 50% of the staff are women, and 50% of the senior management are women. I mean, in the good old days, to be a director of the bank, you ought to be close to 60 and a man. Now you have to be a woman and young.
Well, that's heartening, right? There's a sign of hope there. Just before we move on, in terms of the role that the ECB can play and the EU as a whole, why do you think it's important that, obviously you're doing things at a national level, but the kind of coordination at a Eurozone level,
that's a good question, because monetary policy is unique in the Eurozone, so we have a unique monetary policy. We have, it's a single decision-making body, so this is not a national issue. It's an issue for the Eurozone as a whole, and we want to have rational people, bounded rationality, as we know. Homo economicus is not Homo sapiens, but we want people with bounded rationality, that they can take rational decisions and they can understand what we're doing. If we do that, then we maximize efficiency. The transmission of monetary policy is more effective. People are taking rational decisions on savings and investment. They understand how inflation is being formed. So we maximize credibility and trust in this way.
Yes.
And by working together, we exchange views, we pool resources, and we maximize the comparative advantage. So this is the benefits of working all together.
Yeah. President Nagel, I'm guessing you'd agree with that sentiment.
Well, absolutely. But I just thought what Yanis said. Well, the governing council, we are not the perfect example for sure. We have 27 people in the governing council and only 2 women.
But you're all very financially literate.
We're two very excellent colleagues, but nevertheless, I think this is a good indicator for the whole society. We have to do much more. We are definitely not there. So for the Bundesbank, I can say, well, the same what my colleague Yannis said for Bank of Greece, we improved a lot over time, but we are not there. So I think that is the reason why it is so important that we have to do that on an annual basis to really find out what can we do on top of that. It's not just about awareness. I think at the end it is about action. So it's not just talking, it's really doing something.
Yeah. And Madame Lagarde, as we've heard, it is obviously a matter of fairness, but it's also a matter of delivering on the potential of the Eurozone economy. That applies obviously globally as well, whether it be for entrepreneurship or for savings and investment, which is obviously one of the reasons why you're very interested in this. What do you think you can bring to the table?
Well, I think that we have some really exciting projects that we have to invest in. We have to be far more digital than we are. We have to be more sovereign in our energy mix. We have to look after our security, and all that consumes a lot of financing. Completely legitimate and exciting as a European project. But of course, that financing needs to be mobilized, including here at home. And if instead of saving as much as we do, and we are, after China, I think we are the highest savers, if we invested in those projects, in the financing of those initiatives, I think it would take us a long way into actually delivering on what is expected from us, the Europeans, at least on these three accounts. So capital market, or call it saving and investment unions, whatever, but that has to move together with the willingness of people to invest in projects that are going to help develop Europe and strengthen Europe. So I'm very positive and enthusiastic about it. And last word, I think that what, together with our leaders, Lydia and Marina, we have launched last year, which national central banks have responded upon. We have now a financial literacy network where each and every national central banks participating in the process is saying, okay, this is what we're doing, this is how it works, this is good, this is not so good. And I think that's a real, as Joachim said, we are doing something, we're not just talking about it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, just to sum up what we've been talking about and to kind of convey this this hidden gender gap that exists right across Europe, we now have a short video. So if we can hear that, please.
Europe has a hidden gender gap that almost no one is talking about. It's not about pay. It's about financial savvy. And the numbers will seriously shock you. Data shows 1 in 5 Europeans are highly financially literate. But while 27% of men fall into this category, only 15% of women do. Yes, 15%. Think about it. Women usually handle the everyday spending like groceries, but they tend to shy away from the big financial decisions. The gap in financial knowledge didn't just appear overnight. For a long time, women weren't part of the workforce. They weren't in higher education. They were limited to a life at home and kept out of key financial decisions. Because here's
was obviously a helpful summary of some of what we've talked about, but it also links us through to the next section of our discussion very neatly. As you alluded to, Madame Lagarde, and as we heard in that video, measurement or a lack of consistency in measurement has been one of the key problems in terms of getting to grips with what's going on. You mentioned the network that has been set up. Could you talk a little bit more about the network and what the network can bring, both on the data side and in other ways?
So the network was one of the 5 objectives that we set for ourselves, and that were agreed by the national central banks a year ago. To this day, and I'm speaking under the control of the excellent team that is leading this exercise, all member states have actually enlisted with the network, and additional to that, we have several consumers agencies which have also registered as part of the network. We have museum visitor centers that specifically belong to the network as well. To do what? Well, first of all, to be part of the network so that they can share with each other, talk to each other, compare notes. Second, to actually identify on the networks, which had a meeting this morning, what they have done, what they're planning on doing, how it's working, what results they can measure. And I think on the issue of measurements and definition of impact, there is work that is ongoing and that will be continued. But that's essentially what is done.
That's helpful and the perfect link to Professor Buchanan. What do you see as being the most crucial things that should be measured and to prove what actually works in practice?
So I think to prove what works is actually one of the biggest challenges we have at the moment. And to cite Anna Maria Lusardi, who was here last year, she said that if she would take €1 or $1 for every time somebody asks her what works, yeah, she told the story in the US, so it was not. But let's translate it. So if she would take €1 for every time somebody asks her what works, she would be rich now. And so that really is the biggest question. And I think the challenge here is that we need to agree on a proper documentation of the types of interventions that are offered. Because just to give you an example, so they can be small interventions on apps or a leaflet handed out, but they can also be a full semester course at a university. And at the moment, in the way that research works here is in most models, we just put in a variable measuring whether somebody had an intervention or not. And that's all we do. So it's not about who delivered it. How was it delivered? What was the content? How long did it take? And so in order to understand what works, we need to understand much more what exactly it is that we're providing. And then in the end, it's also the measurement, the outcome. Is it that we care about the knowledge? Do we care about confidence? Do we care about decisions? If yes, which decisions? Do we care about financial well-being? That's a very big word, but I really have not fully grasped myself how we would measure financial well-being, because it's also hugely subjective. And so I think we need to have a framework and a standard for really making progress, because only if we have that, we can answer the €1,000,000 question of what works for whom and in which context and why.
Yeah, big questions, absolutely. What about anchoring it in initiatives that are already happening? So in Germany, I know that has been, was quite an exciting, I think, policy initiative by the last government, which I think is maybe still going to happen, but it's maybe been stalled by a few other policy priorities over the past year or so. But tell us a little bit about the German context and, what experience has shown.
Well, I'm not sure if there is this special German context. I think at the end, when it comes to what we are discussing here on stage, I believe it is of utmost importance to have the right tone from the top. In that regard, I believe bottom-up, yes, is also very necessary, but at the end it is kind of a management decision that has to be taken by politics how serious you are with this topic. And so I believe we need guidance and orientation. So you already alluded to it. We are living in very complicated times, and often when you are in such a phase, things are being, let me say, they're losing a little bit traction. And this is my concern that I have, that we are losing the focus that is necessary when we would like to achieve something in this regard. And so I believe we should maybe become more outspoken on this, despite all of these difficulties. You already said at your introductory statement, Christine, what happened over the past 2 days. We shouldn't forget about the women in Iran and things like that. So we should keep, let me say, the pace in a way, and not being distracted by many other things that are going around us. And that is what I expect from politics. And I hope that Germany can follow this path over the next couple of years. In my institution, we are doing a lot, and the reason why I'm grateful for our network, I think central banking, to a certain extent, is family business. And so we can give a little bit attention to that important topic in the way we are being perceived in the public. And so I believe that it is so important that, Christine, that you put that topic so high on your agenda.
But I think you're absolutely right that you can do a lot as central bankers, but there's only so much that you can do without political support. So it sounds like there's a little bit of frustration that that's not forthcoming.
I'm not sure. I think we are used to frustrations when you are a central banker. So we are experts on this. But nevertheless, what I would like to say is that politics, I believe, I can say it for Germany, they have a good understanding how important this topic is for the whole society. And we have many good economic arguments why it is important. And I already said it, for the whole society. And so I believe that we on the central banking side, we should address this issue. We are not doing this once a year. I think this is one of the things we are doing over the year, getting advice also in this regard, how important it is to work on financial literacy, not only for women, for the whole society. And I guess we are doing a lot here.
And in the German context, sorry, just one quick follow-up.
Coming back to that.
You have, but you've got an added complication, if you like, because the kind of independence of the lender makes it harder to kind of coordinate at the federal level, I suppose.
I cannot disagree. That makes it definitely not easier. We have 16 states.
Yeah.
And so not in every state financial literacy has this level, let me say, where I would like to see that financial literacy should be when it comes to education.
Yeah.
I said it last year, and I'm still convinced by this argument. Yeah. We should start with financial literacy at a very early age. It is the best you start something new when you're young. When you're getting older, things are getting more complicated for yourself. Your learning capacities are distracted by so many other things. So there's still a lot we can do. And so the Bundesbank, we're doing a lot when it comes to the education for really young ages, but it is not, we are not perfect.
I'm sure the professor will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think research has shown that money habits for life are formed by the age of 7. So it's quite extraordinary. In Greece, there have been various, and I should say before moving on from Germany, actually, I'm going tomorrow to Munich to meet with someone who runs a charitable financial literacy initiative there, partly to see if the FT can collaborate effectively with them. But I know there are lots of interesting things going on the grassroots level.
So Munich, where you're going tomorrow, I think taking that as a anecdotal evidence that you will see tomorrow, I think it is important in that regard also to crowd in private initiatives, private capital family offices.
Yeah.
They would love to do a lot more in that area. It's not just investing money, it's also coming with maybe you have a kind of a mission for the whole society. And so we should put that more in the front and say, well, look, there's a lot you can do with your extra money.
Yes.
I think this is an investment for the whole society.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. Professor Governor Stranaras, that's something that is done in Greece as well, right? The kind of collaborative initiatives between, I don't know, community organizations and government-related entities, I think.
Two-pronged policy. First of all, we have a national strategy led by the Ministry of Finance. We are active as consultants, not only us, the Capital Markets Committee, public institutions, private sector stakeholders. So I think we have achieved a harmonized approach. We have a roadmap for financial literacy now. Also, the Bank of Greece itself has taken many initiatives, as I said before. A lot of research with academics on financial literacy, on the effects of the causes, many publications, collaboration with stakeholders to produce simple books for secondary education. Actually, we convinced, well, I was very active here to convince the government to introduce a course on economics in secondary education. I think it is critical to bring that early, especially for girls, because if you give equal opportunities to boys and girls early on in education, you're going to have results, especially for poorer families, because there's a lot of interaction between the children and the parents at home. But this is not all. Actually, there's also programs for the unemployed, for low-income people, for vulnerable women. I mean, our museum, we call it Civilization Center in the Bank of Greece. We have many exhibitions. We had an open day for migrant women. We're trying to integrate them. As you know from sociological studies, it's extremely important for migrant women to be integrated in the societies they live in. So I would say, all in all, we're doing a good job, and I think we can do even better.
Okay. And all that is shared on the financial network. That's the beauty of it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So that, and what would you love to see in terms of that network concretely delivering from the point of view of
well, let's come now to the issue of measurement, because the name of the pudding is in the eating, as you say in your country. So next year that we should establish metrics, and I mean this is one of the big tasks of the Eurosystem financial literacy network. Where I can throw an idea on the table, for instance. In consumer surveys, we know now that the perceptions of inflation differ between men, women, different classes in society. And that differs from actual inflation. Why? Because people have different perceptions. We know the inflation of the poor and the expectations of the inflation of the poor is higher than our forecasts. Why is that? So I think if we measure that the difference is shrinking, I think we have achieved something.
That would be a concrete measurement to look at, yeah.
To be practical.
Okay, very good. We have another chance to look back at what we've been discussing here in terms of what works, what has been achieved so far. In the words of the governors, here's another video for you.
Our goal is to empower everybody to make informed and confident choices. Central banks and their leadership have a responsibility to recognize and champion the importance of financial literacy awareness.
Progress in financial literacy and gender equality is essential to empower women, to reduce inequalities,
and guaranteeing equal access to knowledge
and building people better understanding of their finance. It's very crucial to have a network in order to be more successful in our policies.
Bring together all the creativity and power,
collective ambition,
share knowledge, joint action.
Education is the compass
But consumer protection is the shield.
Clear, fair, and transparent information.
When financial choices are made,
Knowledge improvement initiatives better inform consumers.
good harmonized data is vital for assessing financial literacy.
It allows us to measure what actions are most effective and to share those best practices across the network.
Help us design programs that speak to people's actual needs, not assumptions.
Which in turn enables better policy decision making.
Listen better with that. And this is very true. Especially when you are starting your independent life.
Part of the fixed curriculum of schools.
Better decisions throughout their lives.
Strengthen long-term financial resilience. Acknowledging the problem is the first step. The next is to develop a clear and effective strategy to address it.
Now we've come to the fun bit of the discussion, which is the launch of an exciting initiative by the ECB, Euro Steps, which is a walking challenge. Madame Lagarde, tell us about it.
Yes, that's an exciting challenge. So, at some stage you will see on screen proper identification as to how you can actually connect with an application called Walk 15. Walk 15. The trick of this I'm going to just explain a little bit because I think the video will do a much better job than me. You can register as of now. Okay, you have...
See your
don't have it
QR
yet.
code here.
Okay, anyway, you can register as of now. And all the steps that you walk in your individual capacity will actually count to aggregate all the steps walked by all those who register in your country. That's point number one. Point number two, as you have registered, you will be receiving twice a week a little push that will explain to you something financial. Interest rates, variable, fixed, bond versus securities, how to organize a balance sheet, all sorts of financial information explained in very clear terms, explained in a user-friendly fashion by our teams. And at the end of the month of April, number one, you will have received all those little videos and information along the lines of what I just said. And also, we will stop the clock of you walking, and the steps will be aggregated, and with a very nice per capita, per population weighted methodology, which I'm told is absolutely above board, a country will be designated as the winner. There will be prizes. Some of them are volunteered by national central banks. Some of them will come from the ECB in order to encourage all of you, and as many of you as possible around you, so please pass on the word, Walk 15, so that we can actually send out and push as much as we can of financial information in order to make all of us more financially literate, but particularly women who have this gap that we want to close. So I guess you can now, yeah, it is available. You can all register now. All our panel members have done it. Yes, go ahead.
No pressure, no pressure. Just before you leave the room, you're going to have to download it, because otherwise I won't let you in. And I presume you're going to encourage highly competitive behaviour between all the governors on the committee, and award maybe a prize to the winner. So, from the point of view of Greece, what participation are you hoping for in this kind of initiative, and what does it deliver? Because I guess it could be the kind of thing that embeds habit in people going forward.
I think that for such an initiative, participation and inclusion must be built into the design from the outset and have the following characteristics. I have put them down. First, accessibility that is clear and simple language. Availability in all official languages, actually. Designed for users with different level of skills. Second, relevance to everyday reality matters. financial education is more effective when it addresses practical issues faced by people, and particularly women, such as budgeting, savings, mortgages, and also understanding inflation and digital fraud. Third, I would say interactive technologies, including animation, games, digital platforms, can engage younger generations. And finally, feedback mechanisms. I mean, participation is not a one way. We need to be listening, to be reacting, and to be adapting. I mean, in the Bank of Greece, we plan many games, animations. We cooperate with influencers that can appeal to mothers, to women, to vulnerable groups. So we're trying to be the best.
Yeah. Yes. Very good. And I know, Professor Buchanan, you're leading by example because you've already downloaded the app, and I think you've already got 1,500 steps.
Yes.
Is that all right? Yeah.
I've been walking around the building a lot today.
Yeah, very impressive. President Nagel, assuming you would agree with the Greek example, but what else does the Euro steps signify for you?
Well, I think from time to time, I guess we are all kids, and this gamification, I think this is a very helpful tool to learn things. We are using similar tools in our money museum that we have here in Fráncfort, and we know it from our visitors that they're really happy when they're doing these games. And when you do games like this, you learn a lot, and I think we should use all what is available in terms of digitalized solutions, how to get there. And so I'm keen to learn what I will see in that way to put our joint interest here forward. And so we should use it. This is what I would like to say. We should use all the instruments that are available, all the measures. And it was already been said by Yanis when he answered this question about what is the relevance for monetary policy. I think we all know everything is better when it comes to monetary policy transmission when the audience is much more skillful. It's about trust at the end. And so if you have when you have more people that are literate in a way, and this is not only true for women, it's the same for men, then our monetary policy transmission is a much better one. Yes, there are so many research pieces about this, and this is common knowledge now. Yes.
But if I may say, I think everybody stands to benefit. Yes. Because Yanis Joachim identified the better measuring expectations, better understanding how inflation expectations is formed, and a better literacy about it. But when you talk about measuring the impact, we really have to understand that it's a multifaceted project. If you look around, and I was a bit shocked, but then you're right. You talked about the motherhood penalty. And that motherhood penalty, actually, if you associate that with financial illiteracy, you end up with senior women at an old age who have not invested, who have not thought about longer-term plans, and who end up being much poorer pensioners than men. So, from their perspective, financial literacy is not about how you form inflation expectations, but if they make progress in financial literacy, and if they appreciate that investing at the age of 25 or 30 is going to actually help them carry through those years, which in some instances are compensated and helped out with welfare, as we do, for instance, in the ECB, they will be better off at the end of their life. And there are multiple situations. When you think about domestic violence, which affects many more women than men, if you combine being a victim of domestic violence and being financially illiterate, the concept of independence, the capacity to push the door and get out and leave, is completely different. Whether you have invested, you have a buffer, as you call them, or whether you don't. So it serves many purposes. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off. You were going to ask Professor something.
No, not at all. I think we're kind of at the point where you're going to introduce the sum up video. I can do that if you would like me to. Yeah, it's just as usual, a little video to sum up this section, which is on the Eurosteps.
Hello. Would you like to walk the talk and learn about financial literacy? We women, unfortunately, do not know enough about finance. And what I would like to encourage you to do is to learn more and to be more knowledgeable. There's a gap between women financial literacy and men financial literacy. Let's close it. So if you register on the app that we have put together, you will be receiving during the month of April a little reminder asking you whether you want to be more knowledgeable about interest rates, about loans, about securities, about bonds, about balance sheets, all these things that sometimes seem a little bit obscure. I really encourage you to do that. It's well done and it's fun. Now, what could be even more fun is if you actually walk the talk. So we are throwing a walking challenge at each and every one of you registering on the app. Every step that you're going to walk from April the 1st until April the 30th will count and will be aggregated on a per country basis. We will see which country actually win and which one of you will be picked randomly to earn a special prize. Over to you. As of the 1st of April, it's on.
Yes, do applaud. A call to action there. Right, so you've heard a lot. You may have questions. Now is your chance to ask them. We have some people who've dialed in from around the Eurozone on my screen here, but we have a lot of people in the room as well. So if you do have a question you'd like to answer, just raise your hand and a microphone will make its way to you. Who's going to be first? Yes, the gentleman here. If you could stand up and tell us who you are and ask your question.
Sure.
Yeah.
So my name is Pavel Sikora. I am ECB staff, digital services, and also elected staff representative. You opened the event with discussing the importance of education at Mujer. Mr. Storanas mentioned that accepting a gender gap is waste of resources. And at this event, we discussed specifically the financial education and its impact on life prospects. And what all we do here is very good and well. However, there is another gender gap which has much bigger impact on life prospects. So in the EU, approximately 60% of persons graduating from universities are women, and about 40% are men. We had in this video a lady who was horrified by the difference between 15% and 27%. Well, how horrified she should be by the difference between 60% and 40% if she only cared. European Central Bank supports nearly exclusively the education of women. For example, it has in place this ECB scholarship for women, where it spends roughly 200,000 euros per year on the education exclusively of women, university education. Now I'm asking the question. So last year I asked what the ECB is going to do to close that gender gap, and unfortunately I didn't get a very good answer. So I would like to ask that question again and see what changed. And of course, in the meantime, we also received our proposal for the ECB to introduce such a program. Unfortunately, the ECB didn't do anything. But Mrs. Lagarde, this question is for you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Madame Lagarde.
Thank you so much for your question. First of all, I would observe that the gender gaps exist in our institution, and despite the fact that we have targets that are as granular as we can in order to make sure that we deliver on them, we are still not at target on different categories of our staff. In other words, not enough women yet have reached the level where we can be at target. And this is familiar to all of you. We're not even 50-50 target. We are lower than that, and we are not there yet. So in my humble view, given that those targets are not even yet satisfied, we have to carry on developing the talented women that we have in this institution, not to the detriment of talented men, don't get me wrong, but simply in order to close the gap, in order to reach the targets that we have set for ourselves. And I feel very strongly about that because I think that we all stand to benefit. If there are more women joining the ranks of talented economists, of talented jurists, of talented information and computer experts, we will be better off altogether. Thank you.
Christina, I know that was a question for the ECB, but I can confirm what you just said for the ECB. I can say the same for the Bundesbank. We are not there where Bank of Greece is, but I believe in that regard, the direction of the development is important. We all know that we started at levels where we were maybe, that were not satisfying in a way, but I think the direction is the most important thing. And you did a marvelous good job, Janis, when you reached 50%. For women, for example, in leading position, we at the Bundesbank, we are still less than 40%, but we came from levels much below 30%. So what I would like to say is that if there is the tone from the top, and it is crystal clear what you would like to achieve over the course of the next years, then I believe this is, I guess, the most important message here.
If I can
Please,
add something here. It was not because I made a discrimination. It was on the merit, on the CVs. And this is the important thing.
And it may be...
There was a discrimination before, I think.
That's what I was going to say. Perhaps you had to be correcting a historic discrimination. Yeah. Very good. Let's move on to the next question, please. First microphone.
So thank you very much for having an excellent panel once again, and also for all the initiatives that have been started and some of them even concluded. So last year at our Sintra Forum, we had a very nice winner of our Young Economist Prize who wrote a paper about the fact that the messenger matters. I mean, that was a paper about nationality, but I think it's also probably true about gender. So if we look at the video, but so here on the podium we have two great women. Of course, we had one on the video, but overall there are very few women. If we look at like podcasts on financial knowledge, many of them are moderated by men. So how do we get more female messengers? And would that actually make a difference? Maybe you have some insights into the research. Thank you.
Yes, that would be very interesting to hear.
Actually, from the top of my head, of course, there is this research on that the messenger matters. With regard to financial literacy, I don't know of a systematic study. Christina, can you help out? Something come to mind? No, maybe that's our next project.
You could do a collaborative approach to the next project. Yeah. Coming back to the points that I raised earlier about the messages that are delivered through social media, I think there is a huge male dominance of the influencers talking about financial topics, which is why, actually, just to give you an example of what Flick, our charity, has done, we've commissioned our own influencers, but outside the financial space. So young people who specialize in giving advice about all kinds of things, whether it's entertainment or homeworking tips or things like that, and asking them to deliver our financial tips so that you reach communities. A lot of them are women, a lot of them are men as well, but you're reaching communities beyond the kind of existing financial literate, which I think is pretty crucial. Okay, another question.
Yeah,
Christine Laudenbach. I'm a professor of finance at Goethe. I'm sorry I cannot answer Isabel Schnabel's question, but I have one going in a similar direction. Because you were talking about the messenger, and one thing that I have, especially maybe for Germany, the feeling that no one really wants to take over responsibility when it comes to concrete examples. So what I'm heading at is, if you think about investments, in the end, a lot of women stand there and say, yeah, there are so many products. What should I do in the end? And then you have, of course, conflicts of interest. No one wants to recommend a specific investment fund. Influencers might do, but official politicians, or maybe even the Bundesbank, I don't know, you can answer that question maybe, but we need concrete examples, because we have more funds in the meantime than single stocks, and people just don't know what to do. And my question is, how can we help people to really, really get it going?
Before I will come to President Nagel in a second, but I'd love to come to the professor first, because when we were chatting earlier, she mentioned a very interesting gender bias in this area, I think probably stemming from the fact that the majority of advisors are men, but also to do with a kind of, assumption that is made about women's sophistication in this area. So maybe you could summarize it.
Yeah. So this is a research project actually together with Christine that we've been working on for a long time, where we compared the recommendations that professional financial advisors give to female and male clients. And so this is administrative data from real advice protocols. And what we find there is that women compared with men are much more likely to get recommended overly pricey products, so they pay more for the same type of investment product. And then also for the same fund by the same advisor, they are less likely to get offered a rebate on the upfront load. So basically they're paying more for buying the thing, and then they're paying more for the management because they're investing in a more expensive fund.
Is that because men are pushier and try to reduce the fees? Or?
Yeah, so we even went further then and ran experiments with financial advisors where we gave them client profiles, so abstract client profiles. And half of the advisors we gave pictures, so they had a gender information in just from the picture, and the other half of the advisors just got the profile without any gender information. And what we found there was that, first of all, the advisors believed the women to be less financially literate. They believed them to be less confident. They believed them to be less price sensitive. And then even without any incentive, they say that they're less likely to offer a rebate to the women compared to the men. And the interesting thing is this happens in a completely abstract environment. So there are no incentives in this experiment. And so what we concluded from this is that a lot of what we see in financial markets is driven not just by the gender differences that we see from the women's side, but also from the beliefs about the professionals in the market that act on what they think women and men represent or are, or how they behave. And so basically this lack of financial literacy hurts twice. So it hurts because the women don't know or don't feel so sure about the knowledge, but then because they lack this knowledge, they're not helped along, but then treated worse as compared to if they had the knowledge. So this makes investing for women even more important than for men when you think about it.
It's fascinating. President Nagel, you want to
maybe just to complement this argument, as far as I'm not wrong, there's also research related to men that they're often suffering from overconfidence. So men are not the greatest investors.
They just think they are.
Yeah, this is a kind of, I think we are suffering from cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
So that we think that we are the greatest, but we are not. So what we should do here is maybe to start maybe with the bad examples related to men, to give maybe women the confidence that they are good when it comes to investment, or maybe they are better than the other. So what I would like to say is that there are many ways how we can address these things, but as always, do we have sufficient data? I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, I think we're improving a lot on the data, but I think we're also improving a lot on the, like, having an attention on the topic. Because also an experience that I had a couple of years ago when we talked about gender differences in financial literacy, we got the feedback that this was not a general interest topic. And so, I mean, it's just 50% of the population. Why should we care? Anyway, so this was just an anecdote that is like a couple of years ago this happened, and now we're sitting here debating the topic, and the European Central Bank is taking a big initiative. So I think we already got a long way.
Very much so. I think there was another question here. Do we have the microphone? Yes. Just in the second row.
Sorry, actually it's perfect because it comes completely in line with what was said right now. Well, I'm one of the persons educating women, like on the field, but we also try to scale, so we do our own data collection, and I wanted to see with the professor, because the feeling I get actually is when you design the questionnaires without I don't know, so that the women have to answer, and when you penalize for wrong answers, actually the gap in literacy is a lot, because men guess a lot. So there's a deficit in financial literacy in both genders that is not, but there is, what has to be recognized as the risk aversion of women is a lot higher. Basically, men are, I'm sorry to talk so like if I had all the data, that's what I was wondering, but men act with imperfect information. And the markets reward risk-taking, even with imperfect information. And women need better information, which is actually a more rational behavior at the end of the day. So we have to have this in, it's not only a matter of we learn less, we learn it later, we learn it worse. No, I work with women every day. It's amazing how fast you can change this thing, how easy it is to convey. But it's a matter that it has to be addressed. And also women are like more to feel in control. So it's all back to risk aversion at the end of the day. And we have to work, not all, but a lot with risk aversion, and we have to work with this because the lack of financial literacy is widespread in general, not only women more, obviously. So I think it's also a matter of helping the women, as they say. I have that every day. Making the first step is the biggest. You give a lot of education, but you need to become extremely practical, which ties exactly with the research. I had women read full books that I wrote explaining investment, and at the end say, still, I don't know how to make the first step. After a whole book with full explanation, and it's true, and then I realized it's becoming extremely practical, bringing it down to the field and saying, the next step is this, and these are the 3 exact steps you can make. The questions, I send the women to the back with questions, like these are the questions you can ask. This is, because it's true that the treatment you get from, I have it because my German is not too good, but I live in Germany. I'm a certified financial advisor, and if you see how the man in the bank spoke to me, I was like, okay. Because my German was not good. So he immediately assumed I knew no German, no finance, and the products he offered were a lot worse than what he would have offered. My husband, who knows a lot less about finance, but is German and big and tall. So
it's fascinating to hear your professional experience, but also that personal experience. Did you want to add any question for the panel?
I just wanted to know if this perception I get on the ground, which is of course biased and not, if it has some backing in the research and in the data that you collect.
So actually in these studies that I just mentioned, we also measure risk preferences, and we also control for the risk preferences as far as that is possible. But this financial literacy and also confidence, they matter above and beyond risk preferences. So obviously it's correlated, but it's not just risk preferences. But the understanding of risk is one of the critical factors. So if we think about financial literacy and what we need to teach, I think a lot of what we need to teach is the understanding of risk, and also how risk can be managed through diversification and etc., etc. But so risk is crucial, but risk preferences are not the story or not the whole story.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we are out of time for the Q&A. Oh, and go on. We'll squeeze one more in. There's a lady in the back who's been very patient. If you can keep it relatively brief.
Okay, thank you. My name is Eftichia Coletso. I'm also a staff representative. And you spoke about domestic violence as well as a part of the financial literacy gap. I would like to bring another perspective, that is the culture. And coming from Greece, I know that the culture there is that couples usually they invest together. So my question is for our governor in Greece: do you also plan to tackle also this aspect of the culture and teach young people to be independent once they invest?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you.
Definitely.
No pressure.
Okay. Structural factors also play a role, and traditions also play a role. I wanted also to say that this is perhaps one more cause of heterogeneity. Also your findings, Professor, and also traditional ways of investing, as you mentioned in Greece, is one of the reasons why we have different results. But I don't think this is dominant anymore. You can see now women taking top posts in ship owning, for instance. You can see many women at the helm, many women entrepreneurs. So perhaps this is not the case anymore.
There's actually one study coming to my mind that looks at decision-making within couples. And interestingly, if you have a couple where the woman is more financially literate, in the end, for the investment decision, her knowledge matters less than that of the man. And so I think we're back to this like perceptions and gender roles and also decision-making within families in order to bring like more equality to this financial decision-making. So it's super interesting because they can really measure it within households, and they find that the knowledge of the man in the end matters more than.
And this is not Greece specific.
No. This was data from the US.
There you are. You're off the hook. We unfortunately need to finish the Q&A there. We could go on, I'm sure. There's lots of very, very interesting questions. Thank you for your comments as well. It's time to conclude. For my part, it's been fascinating to hear everyone's thoughts on this really important topic. And I am very glad to say that when we created the FT charity flick nearly 5 years ago now, we had 3 priority target groups: young people through schools and so on, vulnerable communities, but women was the third and arguably the most important, because of this very recalcitrant data point that financial literacy levels are lower, and just the difference that could be made by closing that gap would be very powerful for those individuals, but also for the economies in which those individuals live. I'm delighted that there's such a strong commitment on a pan-European basis for the cause. We've obviously heard strong commitment here today, and there's obviously a great deal of energy going into how momentum can be translated into something more tangible over the next 12 months, as it has over the past 12 months. But President Lagarde, maybe you would like to have the final word on all of this.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to all panel members, to all of you in the audience who've participated in this project. Thank you very much for the organizers, led clearly by Linda and Marina. Could you both stand up to be recognized? Yes, please. us, you've informed us, you educate us. That's brilliant. And you are at the origin of this Walk the Talk project. And I remind you, walk 15, each and every step along the way will actually work. Yeah, that I remember, yes. No, and the two things that I would like to mention also are the two objectives that we are setting for ourselves for March 2027, because we will meet again and we will check again against what we have committed to do. The two objectives that we set for ourselves is number one, and I hope that will help and inform your research, is measure better all these initiatives that have been identified and that are listed on in this financial network that we have built. So measure as much as we can, that's the first one. And the second one is try to target a bit more, because what has been done by many national central banks is a bit broad and not very targeted to closing this women financial literacy gap. So on those two accounts, we stand to be verified and checked next year when we all come back together. And with that, I hand the floor back to you.
Well, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much, all of the panel. I think I've learned a lot, certainly, and thank you all for your engaged participation. See you all again next year. Thank you.
Really, because you really